He was one of the most powerful men in America, worth billions, commanding boardrooms, and feared by rivals. Yet, in the very halls of his empire, his life was slipping away, and no one dared to notice. Except her. A black janitor, unseen by executives, was dismissed as invisible. She saw what no doctor, no assistant, no colleague would admit: silent signs of a deadly illness. But when she spoke up, she was mocked, ignored, and cast aside. The question is, who would pay the price for that silence? Michael Anderson was a man the world admired or envied. At 55, he sat at the helm of Anderson Biotech, a company valued in the billions, shaping the future of medicine. To his board, he was untouchable. To the media, he was a symbol of white corporate power. But behind closed doors, small cracks were beginning to show: moments of confusion, stumbles of speech, lapses he brushed off as stress. And in his arrogance, he believed nothing could touch him. On the other side of his empire was Angela Brown. 44 years old, she pushed a cleaning cart through marble floors most executives never noticed. Once, she had walked hospital corridors in scrubs, a respected registered nurse with a future full of promise. But a fabricated racial discrimination scandal, punishment for exposing the bias of a senior doctor, tore it all away. Stripped of her license, her career, and her dignity, she was forced into janitorial work just to survive. Still, Angela carried her knowledge like a hidden weapon. Years of medical training never left her. She noticed things others missed: tremors in Michael's hand, the faint delay in his words, the blankness in his stare. To everyone else, he was still the powerful CEO. To her, he was a man standing on the edge of something deadly. What Angela didn't yet know was that recognizing those signs would put her at the center of a story no one could ignore. A story that would challenge the very power structures that had once destroyed her life. Angela Brown had seen it before. In patients, in hospitals, in emergency rooms, seconds meant the difference between life and death. But here, in the gleaming offices of Anderson Biotech, those same warning signs were being brushed aside, because they belonged to a billionaire who believed he was untouchable. Michael Anderson's tremors grew harder to hide. His speech slipped more often, words jumbling together, names escaping him. During meetings, he repeated questions he had asked just minutes earlier. Executives exchanged nervous glances but said nothing. After all, who would risk their career by pointing out flaws in the man who controlled their futures? Angela couldn't look away. Every symptom screamed danger. But when she tried to warn Michael privately, his response was sharp. He mocked her, telling her she should stick to cleaning floors instead of pretending to be a doctor. Her history, the scandal that stole her license, the whispers of race and bias, followed her like a shadow. To him, she wasn't a nurse. She wasn't even a voice worth hearing. But Angela refused to give up. Quietly, she began documenting everything she saw. Every stumble, every slur, every tremor. She wrote as if she were back in the hospital, charting the decline of a critical patient. Her notes became pages thick, evidence of a truth everyone else ignored. She mailed them, anonymously, to the only person she thought might listen: Michael's wife, Catherine, a former nurse who would recognize the accuracy in every detail. Catherine did. The report shook her. And she wasn't alone. Angela also reached out to Dr. Linda Carter, a retired neurologist who knew firsthand the sting of being dismissed for both her gender and her advocacy. Reviewing Angela's notes, Linda concluded the unthinkable. Michael might have a slow-bleeding aneurysm or a dangerous neurological condition. Together, Catherine and Dr. Carter urged him to seek help. But Michael's pride towered above reason. Billionaires didn't take advice from janitors, or even from their wives. He carried on, convinced nothing could bring him down. Yet the cracks widened. At a high-profile board meeting in front of investors and media, Michael forgot the names of his closest executives. He repeated the same question 3 times. Whispers spread through the room. His power, the image of control, was slipping. Angela knew it was only a matter of time before the collapse came. And when it did, the world would finally see what she had seen all along. But the question lingered. Would anyone admit that the only person who tried to save him was the very woman his empire had tried to erase? The breaking point came under the blinding lights of a boardroom packed with executives and investors. It was supposed to be a celebration of Anderson Biotech's latest achievements, a display of strength and control. Instead, it became the stage for Michael Anderson's public unraveling. At first, it was subtle, a pause too long, a misplaced word. Then it escalated. He forgot the names of his own directors. He asked the same question 3 times, his voice growing frantic as whispers spread across the room. Some executives looked down in discomfort. Others smirked, silently grateful to see the giant stumble. Catherine, sitting nearby, felt her chest tighten. She knew exactly what was happening. Then it happened. Michael's legs buckled beneath him. His hand clutched the table for support, his face slackening, words tumbling from his mouth in broken fragments. One side of his body trembled uncontrollably. Gasps filled the air as the billionaire CEO, once untouchable, collapsed in front of everyone. Paramedics rushed in, the chaos unfolding like a nightmare. The diagnosis came swiftly, a slow bleeding brain aneurysm on the edge of rupture. It was everything Angela had tried to warn him about, everything she had been ignored for. And yet, in that moment of truth, the room was silent about her role. The executives who had seen her notes, the colleagues who had dismissed her warnings, they stayed quiet, desperate to protect themselves. Angela stood in the shadows, the woman mocked as just a janitor, watching as her predictions played out in front of the world. For Michael, it was a near-death reckoning. For Angela, it was the cruel confirmation that her voice only mattered when disaster struck. But the story wasn't finished. The collapse was just the beginning of a reckoning no one at Anderson Biotech could escape. Michael Anderson survived. Emergency surgeons repaired the aneurysm that could have killed him within days. The world praised modern medicine. But the truth, the uncomfortable truth, was that his life had first been saved by a black woman whose warnings everyone had ignored. Angela Brown's role eventually came to light. The notes she had written, the reports she had sent, the quiet persistence that executives mocked. All of it was undeniable. Media outlets seized the story. How a janitor, dismissed and ridiculed, had been the only one brave enough to act. Investors fled. Within a week, Anderson Biotech lost nearly $400 million in market value. For a company built on innovation and science, its silence toward Angela's warnings was damning. Public pressure demanded change. Anderson Biotech launched sweeping diversity reforms, while Michael, humbled and broken, quietly funded a $12 million institute in Angela's name. Yet Angela refused financial reward. Her words echoed across newsrooms and television screens. Competence and dignity don't depend on diplomas or skin color. Months later, Angela walked onto a stage in Washington, D.C., to receive the National Heroism Award. Cameras flashed as her old janitor's uniform was placed in the National Museum of African American History, a symbol of resilience, justice, and the truth that power had tried to bury. By then, she was running community hospitals, training young doctors, and proving that the same system that had tried to erase her could never silence her. And Michael? He stepped away from business, dedicating his wealth to funding minority medical education. His empire had been shaken, but his life had been saved by the woman he once mocked. This story isn't just about one billionaire or one janitor. It's about how society still decides whose voices are worth hearing and whose are dismissed. The question we must ask is simple. How many more lives will be put at risk before the world learns to listen? What do you think? Was Angela's courage finally recognized? Or was it far too late? Stories like this remind us that racism isn't just history. It's happening in the silence we allow today. If this story moved you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories that deserve to be heard.